All right, ladies and gentlemen, Rob Bell.
You're not even from Texas, and I feel welcome. It's so great to be with you. I thought maybe I'd talk for a bit and then find out what you want to talk about, and we'll go from there. Does that sound good? So, well, it's going to be good. So, just deal with it. Resistance is futile. So, in January of 2007, on a Friday morning, I'm playing in a soccer game. I had a regular habit of playing in a 6:30 a.m. Friday soccer game, and partway through the game, I'm going for the ball, and another gentleman is going for the ball, and I get there a slight millisecond ahead to kick the ball. He comes in right after me to kick the ball, and instead of kicking the ball, the toe of his right foot kicks the outside of my right foot. At the moment, I think, that's uncomfortable. But I keep playing the game because you're in the game and you're sweating and there are endorphins and adrenaline. Anybody know what I'm talking about? You were fine in the moment. An hour later, you're like, oh, that hurts. And so I'm playing and I'm fine and you're sweating, you're hot, and you're going to win the game. But my foot is hurting more and more and more. I drive home at 7:30 from the game, and then I go out to breakfast with some friends. And I'm sitting there, and my wife is on my left, and my friend Don is on the right, and his wife is across the table, and we're talking. And I realize partway through the breakfast, my foot is hurting more. I get up to leave the restaurant, and it's like I have to limp out of the restaurant, but there's no visible thing wrong with it. It's just I can barely walk. I go home, and it's hurting more and more and more. And I call my brother and I say, I can like barely walk. Can you take me? I think I broke something in my foot. So my brother comes and gets me and takes me to the hospital. We pull up to the emergency room. I can't walk out of the car, so they bring a wheelchair. A wheelchair, good for your legs, not good for your ego. Because now you're being wheeled in at the prime age of 37, and I get wheeled in. They do a bunch of x-rays, and they're like, there's nothing broken. You just have something's out, or they're completely unhelpful. Which is odd, because healthcare has been such a smooth sort of situation in our culture, wouldn't you say? Never waited in line, never had an issue. So I am at home, and I can't walk at this point. I am on one foot around the place. And I remember that my friend Tom, do you know that friend who they would have been fantastic in a black market culture? Do any of you have a friend who's like, I got some stuff in a box in my closet in the hallway. They've always got something. They're like, take 3 of that, some Jack Daniels, and you'll be fine, trust me, and it works. Did anybody have that friend? They're just good with foreign substances. A lot of times the bottle does not have a label. It's just something they have. My mother passed this. So he says, you need to call Henrik, my Polish masseuse. How is that sentence not gonna take you interesting places? And I had known Henrik, his Polish masseuse, because my friend, who is a person of considerable means, would often have Henrik, the Polish masseuse, at his house, doing various Polish masseuse type things. And I had at one point seen an actual encounter in which a woman said to Henrik, the Polish masseuse, I've had a wart, like a growth on the bottom of my foot. I've tried every chemical, it won't go away, can you help me? And he said, in front of me, one moment, you please. He walks outside, a little bit of Yoda, he speaks a little Yoda. He walks out in the backyard. He walks around in the backyard. He brings in a weed that he found in the backyard, duct tapes it to the bottom of her foot. 3 days later, wart gone. So I had seen Henrik the Polish masseuse and his voodoo Eastern Europe magic up close. So I say, Great, give me his number. So I call Henrik, the Polish masseuse. Rob, I love your sermons. I'm a friend of Tom's. A friend of Tom's is a friend of mine. How can I help? Henrik, I can't walk. I was kicked in the side of my right foot. I cannot walk. Can you help me? Yes, I know just what to do. I will come over to your house right now. But when I get there, I need you to have certain supplies ready. Completely true story. I need you to have certain supply stories. I need you to have a cloth napkin, a pen, a bowl of egg whites, a box of Kleenex, and a hairdryer. So Kristen and I we line these up in our house. He comes over. He says, sit down. I'm already sitting down. I can't move. He takes the napkin and he folds it into a long strip. He then places it under my foot and ties a knot on the top of my foot. He then sticks the pen through the knot and turns it like a crank. He then takes the Kleenex and dips it in the bowl of egg whites and lays it across the top of my foot. He then plugs in the hairdryer and dries the Kleenex on top of my foot. He then takes the next Kleenex in the box, dips it in the egg whites, places it, dries it. And he gradually takes the box of Kleenex and dries layer after soaked in egg whites layer on top of my foot until I have an egg white cast on top of my foot. At that point, it's Friday late dinner time. I begin to get cold. Not cold like, is there an open window? But like inner core temp starts plummeting fast. I start putting on wool sweaters, a jacket. I lay down on the couch underneath multiple thick blankets because I am so cold, like cold somewhere, like she was a cold woman, kind of cold. You know what I'm talking about? Like not epidermis cold, like soul cold. And the last thing I remember is laying there shivering, body temp plummeting under multiple layers of wool and blankets, and I fall asleep. It's Friday evening, dinner time. I wake up Saturday morning, swing my legs over, stand up, and I'm fine. So the question is kind of, what the hell? Right? There's just a little bit of that. As the French would say, quoi? There's just a little bit of like, So what happened? Well, it turns out that what Henrik did is he put the cuboid bone back in place, and the egg whites reduced the swelling. Do we need to say anything more? Now, that question, what happened, I just answered with two answers, and those were answers. He put the cuboid bone back in place, and the egg whites reduced the swelling. But what those two answers did is raise within you questions, 13 more questions. What's the cuboid bone? And why do egg whites reduce swelling? Well, the cuboid bone is one of 7 bones on the lateral anterior side of your foot, located between the 4th and 5th metatarsals. The cuboid bone, meaning 6 sides, plantar, dorsal, anterior, medial lateral, interior, posterior, which you already knew, just reviewing class for the test. And he put the cuboid bone back in place, and then egg whites actually pull heat from the rest of the body to concentrate the heat in the part of swelling and reduce the swelling, which is an answer. but actually raises a couple of questions. Why does the cuboid bone make it so that you can't even walk if it's off? And why does the reduction of swelling work that particular way, and what is it about egg whites? The answer to that is that the cuboid bone sits in between the fourth and fifth metatarsals, and if the cuboid bone gets knocked off, because there are 6 sides to it, and it's connected, dorsal, posterior, anterior, lateral, medial, plantar, if it's off slightly, then what happens is all the other bones around it have to adjust. Now, a quarter, 26 bones, a quarter of all the bones in your body, a quarter are in your feet. 33 joints, 100 ligaments, tendons, and bones. So if this one little bone gets knocked just a touch, what it gradually does is throw every single one of those 26 bones off. Not at first, it just takes a while. So over the next course of hours, when the cuboid bone is out, gradually every single bone in your foot will become out, and you will not be able to walk. Second answer. It turns out that egg whites contain albumin, A-L-B-U-M-I-N, and albumin is present in the blood. Blood is a protein, but when albumin levels drop in the blood, you experience swelling. So there is some sort of transfer through the skin of albumin from egg whites to your blood, which is why the swelling is reduced. Which is an answer. But it raises a question, why is the foot designed with this one little bone that if it's just tapped by someone in a soccer game, can throw it out to the point where you can't even take a step? And why does the blood work this way? Well, your ancient ancestors, if there was a lion in the bush, needed to be able to turn and run quite quickly. And so over thousands and thousands and thousands of years of adaptation, you developed the ability for this foot to not only be able to stand and to be rigid and strong, to move things and defend, but also to turn and run. And you have, 30 trillion red blood cells and 25 billion white blood cells, of several, 200, billion, trillion blood cells, which have to work in the case. Because if you do take off and that lion does chase you and it happens to get one claw on you and you bleed, your blood then needs to have the ability within it to heal, to rush and take care of bacteria or invaders. It needs to be able to scab over. And so your blood developed all these fantastic characteristics, and even has red blood cells and white blood cells and blood cells that do this and blood cells to that, which of course is an answer, but raises a few questions. Why did your body develop this ability to stand, to tiptoe, to run, to jump, to run, do it all backwards, to spin? Why did your body develop? Well, how come you can do this? Well, there's an answer to that. And how come your blood functions the way it is? Well, because your body over time needed to survive. Why? Because that's an answer. Your body learned how to survive in this world, correct? Why? Because so that you wouldn't die. Great answer. Why? So that you would still be here. Great answer. Why? Because something within your very biology wants to keep going, which is an answer. Why? Because there is something within you that keeps moving forward and believes at some level, is convicted, practices something that we should stay here and not die at the first threat. Great answer. Love it. Why? Because there's something 13.8 billion years ago, there was a singularity, there was a bang, and then there was Taylor Swift. Great answer. Why? 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 Because there is something that has been unfolding in an evolutive adaptive pattern for 13 billion years that says life is good and ought to keep moving forward in whatever this is. Great answer. Why? Because your dad took your mom to dinner. And there was some swimming and some winning, and then you. Have you ever heard an explanation that actually worked in its fullness, that didn't actually raise a whole new set of questions? I just gave you answers which raised questions. You and I were raised in a world with an NCIS understanding of mystery. Are you familiar with the show NCIS? Every episode is totally different than the other episodes. Now, how does NCIS mystery work? Opening scene. There's a dead body in the harbor. And competent professionals show up in sunglasses. And they get from somebody in a navy blue sport coat a few rough details about how they found the body in the harbor, correct? And then competent professionals, as they're putting on rubber gloves, say, let's take a look. And then the act out right before the first commercial is competent professional, tips sunglasses down, gets down on one knee next to the body, looks at the body and says, looks like this sailor didn't make it to sea. And then what is the rest of the episode? The rest of the episode is you learning along with these competent professionals why there's a dead body in the harbor. And what the director did, and at the end, and you find out, oh, because there was a poker game and a mafia hitman and a loan on a Mercedes. Got it. And the mystery is solved in 42 minutes with 21 minutes for commercials. You and I were raised in a world, and your students were raised in a world of NCIS mystery. Mystery exists to be solved. And we have competent professionals with evidence, with searching for patterns, with microscopes and cameras to determine. Now, what the director did is the director simply hid from you processes, events, and actions that had happened prior to you arriving on the scene. And then over the course of the show, what the director did is just gradually pull back the curtain and show you what happened. So at the end, you now see what unfolded, and you have no questions anymore. But the problem with NCIS mystery is it's not reflective of how the universe actually is, and it assumes that now the mystery is solved. But all it does is move the mystery down a layer. Why do human beings, for entertainment at the end of a long, difficult day, of all the things you could do, why do you find enjoyment in learning why there's a body in the harbor? That mystery is not solved. Because you watched the whole episode, and that's weird. Why are you already hoping that season 3 redeems True Detective? Come on. Season 1, yes. Season 2, come on. I want to see more dead bodies. I want to wonder where. You're so excited about the next Bourne Ultimatum movie, right? Jason Bourne's coming back. Awesome. What's he going to do? He's going to kick the ass of people with accents. That's what's going to happen. Like, that's what's going to happen. Did you honestly watch the trailer? Because you were like, oh, what will this one be about? Head injury, ninja kick, somebody in the FBI office going, how did he do that? That's all the places that's going to go. Gospel mystery is when you get an answer, and it's an answer. but you are honest about the fact that it raises a whole new set of questions. Now, you and I are swimming in a modern sea. What, 500, 400, past 300 years? However you, Catherine talked about the age of reason, the age of certainty, the Enlightenment. For several hundred years, we have been swimming in the sea of a culture that woke up to the power of the scientific method to learn more about this world that we lived in. And it's awesome. What, 600 years ago, you asked somebody, why did a volcano erupt? They might have said, 'cause she's angry. And then along comes Newton. He writes this book called Principia. There are mechanical laws of physics. The volcano didn't erupt because she's angry. There's like lava flow and temperature and boiling rates. Apples fall from trees at regular rates. There are plate tectonics. Like there are, what? This isn't because that goddess had an affair with that god and upset that god, and now it's raining. No. There's like clouds and condensation and evaporation. And so you had a magical, mythical worldview that attributed to the very real forces in the natural world, supernatural, magical, mythical powers, abilities, and motivations and causes. And then you had this explosion of, no, you can actually study it. And you can actually explain it. And it's not a great mystery why it happened. It happened because a cloud full of water came over our head and then released that water. And there's a reason why, involving patterns and fronts and highs and lows, etc. Think about if you start in the 1400s and you just make a list of inventions in chronological order, which I did. 1427, you have the printing press, followed by the steam engine, the piano, the fire extinguisher, the thermometer, electricity, the flushing toilet, the submarine, eyeglasses, hot air balloon, safety lock, parachute, vaccination, battery, tin can, photograph, cement, matches, the typewriter, sewing machine, calculator, revolver, postage stamp, stapler, anesthesia, safety pin, dishwasher, gyroscope, rayon, elevator, plastic, dynamite, barbed wire, telephone, movies, toilet paper. The first amen I get is toilet paper. Clearly an event for youth pastors. By the way, the toilet is invented several hundred years later. You have toilet paper. If that doesn't raise questions, you're not paying attention. Movies, metal detector, fountain pen, cash register, radar, drinking straw, air tires, escalator, zipper, contacts, engine vacuum cleaner. All in the past couple of hundred years. This extraordinary explosion of logic, reason, data, evidence, rational, linear thought built the modern world. Hospitals, airports, and 10,000 songs in your pocket. And the power of this new explosion in knowledge, reason, logic, discovery, evidence is it built so much of the modern world, and so many luxuries and so many medicines and so many things that have made our lives better. It's easy to think that that's actually all there is. And so what you will find again and again and again is we don't understand it yet. We have made all these discoveries, but just give us time and we'll have answers. But what we know about the universe is every explanation merely moves the mystery down a level. How did we get here? 13.8 billion years ago, there was a singularity, a bang, and then an unfolding cosmos. Yeah. But how did we get here? Well, it all just came into being. Awesome. Why? Because that's just what happened. Fantastic. Huh? Every explanation moves the mystery down a layer. I was speaking in Miami the fall of 2014 on a Saturday. A woman walks up to me with one of those pouches with a baby in it, with the baby up against her chest. And she says, yesterday, my child was diagnosed with MS. And she smiled, and then she turned and walked away. Is there an algorithm for that? My son and I saw Black Sabbath recently, which was awesome. And by the way, you know that Black Sabbath is unbelievable live? And do you know what Ozzy Osbourne does after every song? Some of you are like, no, I have no idea. What are you, like you wanted to nod, right? Do you know anything? After every song, Ozzy Osbourne walks to the front of the stage and he says to the crowd, God bless you. God, and they all wear crosses because they believe the power of Christ on the cross, the power of Christ protects you from all evil, especially when you're in public trying to help people. Literally, read their autobiographies. It's that straightforward. That's why we all wear crosses. At the end of every song, he says to the crowd, God bless you. Thank you so much for coming. And by the way, his singing is unreal. There are like 17,000 people at the Hollywood Bowl, clear as a bell. Like he's all like, right? Fascinating. He walks out on stage, God bless you, thank you for coming, and then not one bad note for 2 hours. I've never seen anything like it. God bless you. Literally by the fourth song, they're finishing the fourth song, and I'm like thinking to myself, I hope he does the God bless you thing, because I'm like kind of waiting for it. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I'll take it. I'll take all that I can get. At the end, Preston and I are walking out, and there's a young man standing on the walkway. There's like these walkways under these trees to get down to the street, and there's a young man standing there as the crowd is packed. There are people like selling, like the black market t-shirts, and they're selling stuff and food, but there's a guy standing there, and he has a bucket like he's trying to get money, like homeless, but he's wearing like a polo and hair like cut, and it's like when I first glanced at him, I was like, wait, that does not look like somebody who's holding like a please give me money sign. And as I walked by him, I looked down, and I swear to you, his feet are this long. And his shoes are made of like straps and almost like duct tape. He has some condition where his feet are literally like that long. What are you going to Google search for that? Give me the TED Talk on that. My friend Hunter ended his life a couple of weeks ago. I've spent for the past couple of years, I don't know how many days a week in the water surfing with this kid. He's 21, this beautiful kid who had all sorts of struggles. His mom died when he was young. And a couple of weeks ago, I got a text from my beloved friend Dave. After spending 3 years in the water with this kid, almost every day surfing, I get a text from Dave, Hunter killed himself last night. You have evidence or a scientific method for that? Answers merely move the mystery down a level, because life is not lived in a lab. Are you with me? And so we have had this extraordinary explosion of science and reason and logic and evidence and explanations. But when you're an actual human being actually living in the world, some things don't fit under a formula. They exist in other categories. Are you with me? Kristen and I were at Costco a couple years ago. Have you been there? Where you walk out going, good, I have deodorant till the year 3000. I don't even go there anymore because of how often I would walk out of there thinking, I did not need that walking in. And I did not need that for a family of 17. Kristen and I are at Costco, and we are having a discussion about fish in the fish aisle. You know those large freezers where you could store a body if you had to? You know what I'm talking about? And we are having this discussion, the two of us, about frozen fish. And we look down the aisle. We have 3 kids, a 17-year-old boy, a 15-year-old boy, and a 6-year-old girl. And we look down the aisle, and at the end of the frozen fish aisle is where they display the patio furniture. Because there's a clear harmony between those products, I think. And they had this round outdoor furniture display with like a fake fire pit in the middle. And the two of us are having this discussion about which kind of fish to get. And we look down the aisle, and on the outdoor patio furniture are our 3 kids. And they're all like leaning back on the patio furniture with their feet up, like hands behind their head, having a discussion, like, so I says to him. You know what I mean? Having one of those like they're actually in their living room. And we have one of these moments like, everything is okay with the universe, even if it isn't. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Moments of such shalom is the ancient Hebrew word for it. I have this neighbor named Alfie. She's like a German post-hippie. She's probably 67. She wears these long knitted sweaters. And what she does in the morning is she tears up her yard so that it's dirt. And it takes her several months. In the mornings, I walk my dog. And for years, we lived across the street from Alfie up until last year. And I would walk by in the morning, and she would be either in the 2-month process of tearing up her yard, so it was just dirt, or replanting it. And right when she got it all perfectly planted, you know that tomorrow she'll be tearing it up again. So like this 2 or 3 month tear and plant cycle. And I had stopped over the years to talk to her, and every time I would talk to her, the conversation, I couldn't get any mojo flow with Alfie. I would say something to her, like, Alfie, it's so good to see you. I love what you're doing to your yard. And she would just, or she'd just start talking about how it might rain later. And I feel like I can talk to a lot of people. I enjoy talking to people, but I was just always, I'd be like, Alfie, good to, there might be and she would start into something else. I'd be like, okay, well, I kind of think that too, but then there's a dog around the corner, and I'd be like, I feel like I'm getting bits of a conversation that's happening somewhere else that she's listening into that I'm not. 2 years of and I would walk back to the house like, what? I have no Alfie mojo. What is the problem? I cannot get through to this woman. 2 years of walking my dog by Alfie's house. One morning, she walks right up to me, and she says, I can't hear anything anybody is saying. It all sounds fine when I talk in my head, but I can't understand, I can't hear a word anybody is saying. And I walk home like, Alfie can't hear? That would have been helpful to know. Just one detail, Alfie. Help me, help us. What do you do with that? What do you do with that? What do you do with pain, loss, suffering, betrayal, bankruptcy, parents getting divorced, cutting? What do you do with larger existential questions about what any of it means? What do you do with depression? What do you do when their parents move to your town because of mom's job and the kid is just trying to make their way in a new school? What do you do with the actual things that actually happen in life? What is your answer for euphoria? What is your answer for those moments when everything is fine even if it isn't? What is your answer for fear, doubt, worry, insecurity, grandma dying, dad getting cancer? What is the explanation for that mystery? For thousands of years, human beings have had poems, stories, rituals, practices, scriptures, and prayers to help them put language and expression to those experiences in which the lab doesn't help. Are you with me? And you, as youth pastors, you get to create spaces where people can sit in the great mysteries of life. This is not because you are avoiding the realities of science, reason, intellect, and logic. It is because you have moved to a trans-rational understanding where some things can't be explained with reason and logic. And where are the spaces in our culture as science continues to do awesome things? Where are the spaces? Who will create the spaces where when somebody kills themselves with a gun, all of the people who knew them and loved them can gather, and somebody will create the space where they can grieve, lament, celebrate their life? Who will give them the language? Who will give them the rituals? Who will give them the space to be human? Jesus comes in his full humanity to lead us into our full humanity. And that means doubt, and that means joy, and that means anger, and that means longing, and that means shaking your tiny fists at the heavens like antennas, and that means every experience in between. Where will the space be where your kids are free to simply be human beings? Who's creating those spaces? When somebody starts talking about I don't know if the whole thing is relevant, what world are you living in that people don't need somebody to sit with them in the great mysteries? How completely out of the game are you that you're wondering, I don't know if we have anything to offer people? Really? Anybody here know anybody who is experiencing pain? Yes. Pretty much all of you. Yeah. And what do we need? We need somebody to stand in that with us. Joy, celebration. Who will lead the dance? Who will bring in the DJ? Who will do that? Is Google going to do that? Really? Really? Is an app going to do that? Come on. And what has happened in the modern world is the dominance of all of these luxuries and extraordinary advances has almost seduced people into thinking that that's all there is to the human experience. And for thousands of years, what human beings have understood is that we are healthiest and happiest when we have spaces where we can let off and express and release the valve and simply be human together. Now, I want to give you an image, I want to give you a truth, and I want to give you a question to sort of practically put some legs on this. So first, an image. For thousands of years, human beings have built temples. Mosques, tabernacles, sheds, teepees, temples, spaces, sacred spaces. And the reason why they have done that is out of an intuitive awareness that all things are in some way connected to all other things, and that things don't exist in isolation. What reductionist materialism says to you essentially is the meaning that you have, you just made that up. It just exists in isolation. What the great traditions have said for thousands of years is that, in the Jewish tradition, the Lord is one. That experience of joy you had is some sort of echo of a larger sound. This makes sense. Your story is part of a larger story. Your students, many of them, have been marinated in a world that at a very subtle level taught them nothing is actually ultimately related to everything else. But for thousands of years, human beings have had this intuitive awareness that there is a oneness to things. And so in building a temple, the power of building a temple is it helps people conceive of that which is holy and sacred. So you build a temple, you have a religious gathering, you have a faith community that has a physical space where it meets as a way of helping people conceive of that which is sacred and holy, that which is connected to the larger thing. Now, this is absolutely important, but it helps people understand the idea of something that is holy and sacred and belonging to something bigger than itself. But the problem, if the temple stays up, is what can begin to happen in people's minds is they begin to believe that some space is sacred and holy and other space isn't. So you have to build a temple in order to understand this, but then you got to tear that mother down. Does that make sense? So what you see with Jesus is Jesus say, no, you don't understand. The divine isn't confined to a box all the way back to the ark. This is the fundamental tension all the way through the scriptures, which is the divine confined to space, time, a box, or a statue? Is the holy and sacred, which is why Moses is told by the divine has no boundaries or edges. Brand new idea in human history. That which cannot be confined in actual space and time. So what you find right away are things like the psalmist saying, the earth, Psalm 24, is the Lord's and everything in it. What's the psalmist saying? Come on now. What the psalmist is saying is, the whole thing is a temple. The whole thing is a temple. Your job is to teach your kids that the whole thing is a temple. The physics lab, the coding center, I was like, coding center? The coding nerds. There, I got it. Coding nerds. The whole thing is a temple. Because a lot of people, when they get a paycheck from the temple, get confused and think their job is to keep the temple propped up. I don't know, is that Christian music? Oh, does it suck? Probably. You see what that is? Does it exist in the temple? Well, wait. Whole thing is a temple. The whole thing is a temple. And if you're a Christian, the Christian tradition takes this way farther. Because what is Eucharist? This bread and wine is holy because all bread and wine is holy. We do not come in out of the big bad world to meet with God. We gather to take the bread and wine to remind us that the Christ is in the common and the divine is in all of life. You're not trying to teach your kids to come to a place where they meet God. You're trying to create a space where their eyes are opened and their senses are heightened to the divine, sacred, holy nature of all of life. You're a scientist, you want to study history, you want to study biology, you want to code computers, you want to be a public school teacher, you want to be an artist, you want to start businesses and make lots of money. Awesome, the whole thing is a temple. Go. Enjoy it. This is your sacred gift to the world. That kid needs to know from day one there is no division here because the division has killed everybody and it doesn't even exist. And now you have quantum physicists saying, actually everything's made of atoms and atoms are made of particles and particles are relationships of energy. Time magazine, Jeffrey Kruger, 3 years ago, the Higgs boson discovery is spiritual. Actually, by the way, here's how I picture it. For a generation, people have understood this weird thing that somehow science and faith aren't the dance partners they've always been. And what they've pictured almost is like science going this way and faith going this way. But if you and I face each other and then we turn and walk away from each other because we aren't together, and we walk long enough, we will go around the world and we will walk into each other. So I think what's actually happening right now is they've been pushed so far apart that they just did that, and they just kept going, and they walked around the earth, and now they're walking up to each other again. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening. So anybody who's like, oh, well, how can you be faith and science? How out of the game are you that you're actually living with those old nasty categories? Are you kidding me? Come on. The whole thing's a temple. The whole thing's a temple. The whole thing's whatever they discover next, awesome. The greatest theologians and the greatest scientists are all saying the exact same thing, which is, and I'm going to get technical here, whoa. Literally, Lisa Randall knocking on heaven's door, her new book about dinosaurs and physics and considered by many like one of the greatest living scientists. I saw her there tonight in Santa Monica, and literally half the questions, she had these brilliant answers about gravitational force and quantum physics, and then she would say, at some point it got to be so beautiful because it was almost like a liturgy. She would give this technical, brilliant answer, and then she would say, beyond that, we don't really know. was so beautiful. It was so fantastic. It was so like, yes, all of it. The whole thing is a temple. What do you? And then people will use this phrase, which I love. I don't know. I'm just into God's truth. What the? Like there's some other kind? See, these categories are so ridiculous. True, period. Is it true? Fantastic. Which leads from an image to a truth. In the first century Corinthian church, you have this fascinating thing, and hang with me here, this will be a little weird, but just hang with me and try to imagine. There were different Christian leaders, and people followed the different leaders and didn't follow the others, and there were like rivalries between the different groups of followers. I know. Makes you believe in original sin, you know what I'm saying? Or, as my most influential preaching mentor, Ezzy Izzard, says, original sin, like, I poked my eye out with a badger. Oh, good, that's original. Now, what's fascinating is the Apostle Paul charges into the situation with a letter, like you do. And he's like, basically, you knuckleheads, original Greek. Some of you say you follow Peter. Some of you say you follow Paul. Some of you say you follow Paul. What? Basically, he says to them, if it's true, it's yours. So he sort of confronts this weird sort of rivalry they have with, wait, why wouldn't you open yourself up to the truth from whoever it comes? Fair game, well played. But then he continues. It's a run-on sentence, not his first. He does not stop there, though. Whether it's of Peter, Apollos, Cephas, or the world, or life, or death. What does he say? Or the present, or the future. So he starts with the scope of a few rivalries among teachers. But then just for fun, because you know he's just going to apple rainbow death wheel them. You know what I mean? Like this is going to make your frame freeze up. Oh, all things are yours. If Paul says it, it's yours, and it's beautiful. If Apollo says it, it's yours. Oh, and if Peter says it, it's yours. Okay, got it. Oh, and the world, which I think is a slightly more expansive category. Would you agree? There's a little leap between the third and the fourth thing in his list. Would you agree? It's like Paul, Apollo, Cephas, oh, the world. And then if you're like, oh, okay, the world, got it. Fairly wider category. Oh, life. Bit wider. Death, pretty much think we got it covered there. What does he say? Present, future? It's almost, he's like, things unseen. Oh, and by the way, all the stuff that I haven't included, I'm including. You know what I mean? And what does he say? All things are yours. All things are yours. And you're of the Christ consciousness, the energy that animates all things. What does he say in Colossians? He holds all things together. So when he speaks of Jesus, he does not speak of a solution to a problem that was inserted late in the game. It wasn't like God was like, oh man, they're naked and running around. What am I going to do? You need a job. Go down there. This is actually the thing that the New Testament writers seem to be addressing most clearly and bluntly, which is the Christ is not a solution to a problem kicked up at the last minute. Through him, all things were made. He holds all things together. There is an energy that surges through all of creation. The cross is not something new. It is the revelation of that which has been true all along. Jesus isn't cooked up at the last minute. Jesus the Christ isn't Jesus the last name. It's Jesus, the revelation of the divine energy surging through all of creation from the very beginning. So when your students stumble across something and think, this is life, what does that have to do with Jesus? Other than everything, you're back in the temple. Your job is to tear the temple down. Your job is to tear. Do you have anybody who comes every time there's a church meeting and there's something within you that's like, oh, that's great, they're really committed, but now you're 7 years in, and you're like, I don't think they're getting it. Anybody know what I'm talking about? They're actually too into this thing. I actually wonder if they're here because they don't have a life. Can we be honest about this? Can we just be honest about this? They're really, really into this. I don't think they need another church service. I think they need a cause in the world with real people to give themselves to, and they keep coming to church and singing songs about Jesus as a way to avoid the very real responsibility they've been given by the Jesus who says, you will do greater things than me. Are we preaching yet? The temple can become a place where people hide out from the very real calling we have to do something with this world. And so your job is in some strange way to build it and create it and to name the space and to frame it and let it be what it is, and so that they have a place to gather, to have senses heightened, but then you also at the same moment in some strange way are tearing it down. Yeah, now we're talking. You're both building it and subverting it at the same time. This is why how often what you're really saying in a lot of those sermons is you're saying, I'm so glad that we've gathered here, but this isn't the point. Anybody know what I'm talking about? But obviously, when the paycheck is tied into that, it's easy to be like, we're so glad you're gathered, this isn't the point, but we're so glad you're gathered, please come back. Because I'd love to send my kids to college. Yeah, it's just like politics, follow the money. You're building the temple and you're tearing it down because you want these kids to understand that the whole thing is a temple. You want to study literature, you want to study comparative religions, you want to go drill wells, you want to stand up, you want to organize for Bernie, you go do it. Because the whole thing is a temple and all things are yours. Now that's a tattoo. You get barbed wire. All things are yours. Do something with some balls. You know what I'm saying? In the world, all things are yours. I think Paul knew exactly what he's doing. It's like you have this little petty, weird rivalry about who's right and who's wrong. Claim don't just affirm it, claim it. He's not just saying every new quantum physics discovery, go, wow, that's pretty cool. Don't just affirm it. Claim it and own it, because you are of Christ and Christ is of God. Celebrate it. Lead the celebration. No way. I was at a party, and I was introduced to the man who's in charge of everything that we put in space at JPL, like one of the most famous scientists in the world. And my friend was so excited for the two of us to meet because he was like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. And the first thing he says is he says to me, I'm in my 70s. He says, I've been doing this a long time. And he says, we are going to find life on other planets. Not in my lifetime, but in yours. He says to Kristen and I. That's like one of his opening lines. Because I'm like, this is one of like the greatest living scientists. If I said his name, you'd be like, whoa. And that's like one of his opening lines, is like total woo-woo stuff, which suddenly I'm like, really? Cool. And he says, and when we do, you're a pastor, it's going to completely destroy your whole story. Because God's sending Jesus to save people. What if there's other planets? And I said, oh, no, you've completely mistaken. For me, it'll just make the story even better. It'll just make the story even better. If your faith is going to crumble if they find life on other planets, then just get a new one now. And if your faith is in trouble because the earth is older than 6,000 years, get a new one now. Just quickly, like literally, go out to the car, in the glove compartment, take it out, put it on, wear the shirt, and if your students aren't handed a joyous, limber, open, celebratory understanding of this beautiful, strange, mysterious, exotic world, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. You're building a temple, you're tearing it down, all things are yours. One last thought. Friend of mine, a comedian, brilliant comedian, travels all over. He's as funny as they get. He recently, and doesn't come anywhere near a church. And he's over at our house all the time. He's just like a brother to me. He recently interacted with a Christian pastor. Are you familiar with Christian pastors? And he says, I just had this interaction. I was traveling and I interacted with this Christian pastor. And he's like, I started asking him questions. And he said, it was so weird because he kept talking about, basically I just kept asking him more refined questions. I was trying to get at, like, what are you doing? Like, what's the thing that drives you? Because my friend is really like, because a comedian goes for the chum in the water. Like, why do you do what you do? Why is that offensive? Why don't you say certain things? Why don't you? There's like a radar for that which no one wants to talk about. So he just does it in real life. Like, he'll say something like, yeah, that was kind of weird. And he'll be like, why? Because he's looking for material. But he's also, like, there's this radar. As soon as everything gets polite, he's like, oh, no way, I'm not doing the formal polite thing. I'm going to find out why everybody all of a sudden stiffened up. And he says, the pastor, basically, he's like, I just kept asking him questions, and eventually he was like, well, because we got to get people in. We got to get people in the building. We got to get them converted. We got to get them part of the church. And my friend was like, obviously, like, but you get paid when they come in. So it seems like there's a couple things going on there. And he's like, yeah, but, and my friend says to me, after a while, I realized it's like he's playing with scared money. He's like, it's like he's playing with scared money. Oh, are you playing with scared money? Is your community playing with scared money? Ooh. They're reading that. Ooh. The moment your kid starts finding out about some idea or some new expression, or they go do that, the moment you tense up, the moment you become, you have just taught that kid something about the thing that you represent, which is, we don't quite know what to do with that. Instead of, yeah, keep going. What else did you learn? What else did you find? Yeah, that I actually don't do that for those reasons. Yeah, that actually, in my experience, is quite just. You can be as honest as possible, but they'll probably be much more interested in your opinion if at the outset you are like, yeah, what's in that? Is there anything good in that? Oh, there isn't? Okay, interesting. They're probably much more interested in your very straightforward, I never take part in X, because all I've ever done and seen is it brings destruction. They're probably much more interested in your very clear denials and warnings of things when they understand that your spirit is, all things are ours. Are you playing with scared money? Are you playing with scared money? When it comes to science, are you playing with scared money? Because all things are yours, and you are of Christ, and Christ is of God. Your job is to tear temples down, because all things are yours. You don't need to play with scared money. You don't need to play with scared money. Come on. Come on. Who will stand with kids in the sacred spaces of loss, joy, euphoria, suffering, death, cancer, cutting, despair, celebration, music, good food? Who will create those sacred spaces? Because we need them more than ever. The thing that you do, the world needs more than ever. And some of you are actually paid to do this, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do. What? You get paid to do this? Are you kidding me? How fantastic is that? What in the world? Come on. I have no idea what time it is. I have no idea how much. Oh yeah? Okay, can I do one more thing? Let me finish with one story. 1 minute. And then we're really done. Then we're done for my whole thing. Okay. Okay, so a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Love Wins, which was unique in the history of publishing because everybody who read it really liked it. And so I did all this media. And I was on in New York back and forth and I was doing Good Morning America, and they said, we're so glad that you're on today because the other guest is Sammy Hagar, who can't drive 55. And you all know Sammy Hagar, right? Okay, good. And they were like, this is so great. So he comes in and we're hanging out, and a surreal life became slightly surrealer, if that's a word. And they said, we're so glad that we have you and Sammy, would you guys do a photo shoot together? Because at Good Morning America, we love moments like this. And I'm loving moments like this, and I'm loving the fact that my wife and his wife are chatting. It's all just like, if you ever have a moment when you're like, if you would have shown me this video clip from this period of my life, I would have been like, no way. So they take us on the set, and he and I do these photos together. And then everybody leaves. They go back to the green room. They go over to the other set because they're coming out of a commercial. And he and I are sitting side by side, and he leans over, he's like, so man, like, what do you do? And I had one of those, like, I'm sitting with Sammy Hagar, and he just asked me what I do. And I was like, well, this is fascinating. So I said, well, I believe we're all in this together and there's good news. Like there's an empty tomb. Like we're going to be okay. And what I get to do with my work is I get to go around and create space. I get to create space where people can be human. And they can find out that all the stuff they have jammed down in there, it's okay. Because I believe there's something that's moving in the dark and the light, in the good and the bad. So I get to create these spaces where people can be free to be fully human. And they can find out that all that stuff in darkness, there might even be something new happening there. And I get to go around and do that and announce good news. And he listens and he goes, man, you could change the world with that shit. So, my brothers and sisters of Progressive Youth Ministry, may grace and peace be with you, and may you change the world with that shit.